So today's Torah portion comes from the book Devarim, Deuteronomy, right? And it means words, and Re'eh is the name of today's portion. Word means behold. Father, we thank you for this portion, Re'eh, to behold. And I just pray for your power and your presence to open our minds to what it is, all the wonderful things in your instructions that you want us to behold, to see, to hold on to. Be with us today, Father, in Yeshua's name, we pray. So, what is it you suppose that he is wanting us to behold? He says, behold, I set before you today. Okay? So he set something in front of us, wants us to take a look at it, wants us to behold it, wants us to look. What do you suppose it is? Any guesses? Let's see. Let's look at the definition. What does it mean to behold? We have our Western thoughts about what it means, but we're going to go back to the definitions here, the biblical definitions, and see what it means. It means to, Brown Driver Briggs defines it as to see, to look at. I like these. Inspect it, perceive it, and consider it. Strong's Concordance adds the word discern, have experience of it, in other words, to enjoy it, gaze at it, take heed. So behold means a whole lot more than just like look. I mean, we kind of reduced it down. I know I've done that in the past, just reduced that word down to it just means look. Obviously, it means a lot more than that. It means to seriously consider it, perceive what it's saying, check it out, okay? Discern it, experience it, enjoy it, take heed. So it's almost like this word can, if you look at these definitions, it can be something that's, you really do need to check it out, because if it's something you need to take heed, that's like this could be good or bad. But you can enjoy it, so that obviously the good is good. Inspect, discern it. Be careful. I mean, that's good or bad, right? So what is it? What is it he's put before us? Here's the whole verse, Deuteronomy 11:26. Behold, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of Yahweh your God, which I command you today, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of Yahweh your God. I think we need to look, behold, consider, discern. This is where we get in trouble. This is really, to me, I think this is one of the most profound statements in the entire Bible. Okay? When, God, who by definition does not change, makes a statement like this, how could we possibly ignore it? I mean, he said, "This I'm setting in front of you a blessing and a curse." Now, if we ignore this, we need to quit. But we didn't quit. We're the people that didn't quit. We kept going like there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And he says, here's what the problem. You want to know why you're walking in blessings one day and the curses the next day, and blessings and curses and blessings, and it's very confusing? This is why. Because you've been told to ignore this. The enemy wants you to ignore this and everything that comes after it. Okay? So if we look and consider and discern and take heed, it's going to make all the difference in the world, isn't it? I mean, seriously, it really is. The stuff that we've just ignored in the past, no. Check that out closely, because this is, and he goes on to say, it's life and death. And that's what ultimately blessings and curses come down to, right? Is life and death. So this understanding, this concept is probably going to make more difference in our day-to-day life here on this. This is not about salvation. He's not talking about salvation. He's assuming you believe in God, you've accepted the Messiah. Now this is about your walk. This is going to make more difference here on this planet in your life than anything else in the Bible. This concept, okay, of blessings and curses. That's what we experience. It really sets up what we're going to do, how we're going to approach every other verse in the Bible. Are we just going to read it like it's poetry and philosophy, or are we going to take heed? and enjoy it. I mean, it's not even scary. It's like, get the good stuff, take heed, enjoy it. He wants blessings for us, right? And avoid the curses. I like that. Okay, I want to walk in blessings and avoid curses. So they're about to pass over the Jordan. They're about to go into the land, and they get this. And so he tells them that they need to take heed. They need to be careful and do all the statutes and judgments which he sets before them. Okay? So, what do you suppose, this is an interesting question, what do you suppose, you're going to go into the land, Israel is being Israel this time, they're the place they're supposed to be, you're going to go into the land, want you to walk in blessings, not curses. What's the first instruction they're going to get? He's going to set before them, I'm fixing to tell you what it is, are you ready? Like, yeah, we're ready. I'm thinking back. I literally read this and go, okay, what's the next verse going to be? It's like, is it going to be maybe like in the garden? Don't eat that. Be careful what you eat. There's good food and there's bad food. There's stuff that's not food that y'all call food. It's not food. There's food and anti-food. Maybe we should say, instead of clean and unclean, that would make more sense. There's food and anti-food. Okay? Okay. Maybe it's 10 Commandments. That would make a lot of sense, right? If we could have the 10 Commandments. But this is specifically about walking in blessings and avoiding curses. So maybe it's something that's going to bring blessings or curses onto Israel. That would make a lot of sense. Maybe both. Let's see what it is. These are the statutes and judgments which you shall be careful to do in the land. Okay? All the days that you live. He wants to. So this is not just like, okay, you just do this today and you'll be cool. This is your life. This is Israel. This is your life. You shall completely destroy all the places which the nations or Gentiles which you in the land which you go to possess, where they serve their gods. When you go in all the places all their worship places, destroy them. Yahweh's not really into diversity, is he? No political correctness here. Okay? So, what else? And you shall overthrow their altars, break their pillars, burn their pillars with fire. You shall cut down their carved images, their gods, and destroy their names, the names of their gods, out of that place. So if a place is called by a pagan name, get rid of it. Destroy that name. Change it. Okay? There's definitely no political correctness there. No. Where's this inclusivity, come on. But it's not for political correctness. What's it for? It was to avoid curses, right? And to be able to walk in blessings. Now, where would that idea come from? And if we back up to chapter 4, we see it. It says, therefore take heed to yourselves that you saw, so you saw no kind of likeness on the day that Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb, which is another name for Sinai. Horeb actually means desert. In Horeb, in the desert, is what it's really saying, meaning at Mount Sinai. When God spoke out of the midst of the fire, you didn't see anything. So how are you going to make a picture of something you didn't see? But don't act corruptly and go make some kind of a carved image, a graven image, likeness of any figure, the likeness of male or female. Okay, so we don't do that. The likeness of any beast on the earth. Any winged fowl that flies in the air, so we don't do that. Okay? Or the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, or fish in the waters under the earth. So he's like, you didn't see anything. Don't go making things. Right? Don't making things. In verse 16 there, make yourself a graven image. That's, you've heard the word engraved, right? You go to get a bracelet engraved. That's Old English. It comes from this word graven. It means carved. Okay? Carve or engrave. So don't sit down and make something male or female. Now, without picking on anybody, there's places you can go in to supposedly study the Bible, and there's going to be a great big statue, okay, sitting in the front, sometimes hanging on a cross. Even more amazingly, we were in Salt Lake City and were invited to see something and walked into a building like, oh my goodness. There was a statue of Jesus that was like 2 stories high in there. We're like, there's a commandment about this. Do you know that? Like, can I see your Bible? It actually was interesting. And the problem is, just like in other congregations, simply haven't been told. And they're like, okay. It's like, now what do you do? Why should the nations, it was granite. That was like, you could break it. Like somebody spent a lot of money to make something they wasn't supposed to have. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in heaven. He's done whatever He pleased. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they don't speak. They had eyes, but they don't see. They have ears, but they don't hear. They have noses, but they don't smell. They have hands, but they don't handle. They have feet, but they don't walk. And they don't even mutter through their throat. The ones who make them become like them. And so does everyone who trusts in them. Now, if this was just somebody randomly saying this, this is the inspired Word of God. And He's telling us that those worshiping pagan idols become like them. Do we become like Yahweh, become like Yeshua when we worship Him? We're supposed to. If you're in Messiah, we should walk like He walked. Let this mind be in you that was in Messiah. So if we're worshiping Him and following Him, we should start to look like Him. I don't mean physically, our walk. We should reflect Him, right? And not something else. We should start thinking like Him. Okay? If we worship money, do we become like it? Able to, think about people that worship money. Able to buy lots of stuff, but cold and heartless at the same time, like a piece of paper or a coin. What does the Bible say about that? It's interesting. Romans 1:18, talking about run-on sentences with lots of ands. This is Paul. And it's Hebrew, obviously, and his thought, and we obviously have the Greek version, but his thought patterns are certainly Hebrew. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. That word means the thing that's not right. For the unseen things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being realized by the things that are made. Just look outside. Okay? Look outside. See the world. Like, there's diversity, there's balance, there's power, there's beauty. That didn't crawl out from under a rock. Even His eternal power and divinity for them to be without excuse. It says, you don't have to even have read this book. You should be able to just look out at the world and just go, wow. Wow. You're without excuse. Now, the native peoples of most countries do that. They look out and they worship a God. They don't know who He is. They say, whoever did all this. Okay? It's only the intellectual people who have been trained not to believe it are the ones who don't believe it. It says, because knowing God, they did not glorify Him as God. Because knowing God, they did not glorify Him as God. There's the rest. I want the rest of that verse. Became futile in their thoughts. So their thoughts were darkened. So they see Him in the world, but don't think of Him that way because their thoughts are darkened. There are over 20 words in the Hebrew Bible that are translated as idols, just in the Older Testament. Okay. So what I want you to get and what I want you to see today is it's not just a big idol stone image that we bow down to. More importantly, probably for us, it's also an idea of our own creation that we bow down to, that we honor. Think about that one. It can be an idea of our own creation, not of God's creation, that we honor, that we lift up, that we follow. Okay? That's an idol. I'm going to show you that. And the basis for idolatry and the way the word idol is used in the English language comes from the Bible. all of our English language was originally came from the Bible definitions. This is the Webster 1828 dictionary. Webster did write a Bible. Did you know that? It was a Webster translation. And what an amazing idea. It's like, why, in order to translate the Bible as clearly as possible, he needed to understand what the words meant. And so out of that years and years and years and years and years of studies, he developed not only our first American dictionary, but also a translation of the Bible. One of the definitions he has there, it says, anything on which we set our affections, that to which we indulge an excessive and sinful attachment. He didn't say anything about images or shapes or stones or gold, did he? Anything, including ideas, by the way, sports teams. I mean, it's amazing. People worship a sports team and they've never even been to the town where the team's from. You know, that's what gets so crazy. You know, it's like, you went to go to school there? No, actually, I've never been there. It's like, okay. But so it's anything that we set our affections on that we indulge in an excessive way or have a sinful attachment to it. An idol is anything that usurps the place of God in the hearts of His rational creatures. That's Webster's definition, 1828. Think about that. Anything that usurps the place of God. How would you know if it usurped the place of God? How could you tell? Okay? I mean, think about that. You can figure that one out. If I'm doing this instead of what I'm supposed to be doing in God or in Messiah, then it's usurped that place, whatever that is. Okay? Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up to the uncleanliness through the lust of their hearts to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Remember what the psalm said? It said they will become like the thing they worship. If you worship the idol or the idea even, okay? So it's saying in verse 23 that they're worshiping animals, right? A corruptible man, worshiping birds and animals and creeping things, and God gives them up to uncleanliness through their hearts, the dishonor of their bodies between themselves. Okay. Is he saying they're acting like the animals they've been worshiping? I mean, that's what we have today. If you think about it, I mean, it's like, seriously, it's 2,000 years ago. It's still going on today. Maybe worse. Okay? Wow, that was wild. What was that? For this, there we go. Okay. And he goes on to explain. It says, for this cause God gave them up to dishonorable affections. Remember, part of Webster's definition was to do that which is dishonorable to God, that which is a sin. So because they've been doing stuff that's dishonorable, he gives them up to that affection, the dishonorable. Even women change their natural use for that which is against nature. And men likewise gave up the natural relationship with women and are consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error. Okay? So, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased or reprobate mind to do what ought not to be done. So they're worshiping this idea. First of all, they're worshiping on an idea. I want to stay with that for a second. They're worshiping this ungodly idea. And it's like, if you insist on worshiping that idea, I'm going to let you believe the lie. Okay? That's really what he's saying. So they will have a mind to do that. So what effect does that have? Is that just in this one area that he's talking about here? Or does it spread? It says they're filled with all manner of unrighteousness. No, watch what happens. It spreads because now you've got a debased mind, and now it's spread into all sorts of areas. All manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness, and they're gossips. Okay? Remember, this is 2,000 years ago. We're not talking about some political issue today or some cultural, social issue today. Okay? And if you think about the people that are involved in this, it's not just something that goes on in the darkness in their house. It's on the street, and all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, envy. Think about it. Murder, including murder of the tongue. Okay, that's how murder starts out. That's the Hebraic concept there. It doesn't mean they're necessarily shooting people. Murder with the tongue. Okay, strife, deceit, malicious. Okay? They're slanderers, haters of God. So if you got a debased mind, you're going to hate God, right? And so one of the tests, here's a test. You want to find out if your head's messed up, if you have a debased mind or reprobate mind? Do you hate God? You want to test somebody, say, what do you think about God? And if they just pop a cork, oh, you've got one of those reprobate minds. Do you know that? What my pastor told me. It's in Romans. Paul said it. Because by that time, there'd be smoke coming out their ears. Haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Oh my goodness. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. You know, it's like, if you think about it really, it does sound like Paul lives, he sounds like a street preacher out west somewhere right now. Yeah. But if we think about the pagan Romanism that Paul was encountering here in the first century, really came from the Greeks. The Greeks had a very hedonistic lifestyle. They believed that the crescendo, the peak of the creation of the universe was actually the human body, the naked human body. That's why all their statues are naked. So they worship the naked human body. Gymnasium was a place where they swam in the nude. They played games in the nude. Everything was in the nude. Obviously, it's going to get into other things. And so Paul is seeing this in his day. The Romans defeated the Greeks only in power. They adopted their culture completely. So in the Bible, in fact, in some of your translations, it's mentioned about the Hellenist or the Hellenist Jews. Those were Jews who accepted the Greek lifestyle, lived up on the southwest side of the Sea of Galilee. And so it was common. There were groups, there were places. So if you lived, down by the Jordan, you'd say, out to the west, way out west, there's a place where this is typical, okay? So they go on, it says, what's interesting about, they not only do it, but they approve of those who practice it. And that's what we have in our days. So he's really lumping the approval of it into the same thing. If we're approving of it, we're giving sanction to it. It's almost like Paul when he recognizes that he was there when Stephen was stoned. He's repenting for saying, you know what? I was standing there and I approved of it. I helped people's clothes, And so he's realizing his error and repenting of it. But today it's not politically correct to disapprove of ungodly practices. Okay? We're going to talk about that some more. And so what really is going on is people do become like the things they worship. And like I say, one of the worst idols we can have is a mental image in our mind. Okay? I dare say that for many years we worshipped a God in our minds, many of us, who it wasn't true as who he really was. Some of his aspects were true, his love and his grace and his mercy. Praise Yahweh, that was correct, or we'd probably all be dead. Okay? But it's also, like his word says, he winks at our ignorance. Okay? And praise Yah for that. That when we're walking in in this darkness that he realizes that we're not doing it. What about if we do it in rebellion? It's a different story. Okay? But the interesting thing too is that his word still stands. So even if we do something that brings on a curse and we're doing it in ignorance, the curse still comes. Now we're going to be really confused about why it came and where it came from, but it still comes. Okay? And so will the blessings. That's why you see people like, wow, this guy here, he's a nice guy, he's doing cool stuff and he's really blessed. Look it up. Most of the time they're walking in Torah and don't even know it, So let's talk about that greatest form of idolatry, which is idols in your heart. Oh, is that a PJ concept? No, it's a biblical concept. Therefore speak to them and say to them, so says Adonai Yahovah, every man of the house of Israel who sets up idols in his heart and puts the stumbling block of his iniquity before his face. What does that mean? The stumbling block of his iniquity is the idol in his heart. Putting it before your face is in the forefront of your mind, is what I'm looking at, it's what I'm doing. Okay? It says, I, Yahweh, will answer him in it by the host of his idols. So it's telling you right there that, that curse is going to come from that idolatry. Okay? This is Psalm 135:18, God's Word's translation. It says, those who make idols end up like them, so does everyone who trusts them, meaning trusts the idols. So, idols, this is really important. Idols don't have to be statues. They can be anything, just like the previous verses said, anything we create in our mind. And those, for example, who believe that men and women are not really men and women, that it's just something that we have in our head, they lose their God-given identity as to who they are. And their belief system that your gender is something that's in your mind as opposed to the body that you live in becomes an idol in your mind. Now, the fascinating thing about that is, on the one hand, they teach that your gender is determined by your thinking. Then they immediately, when they make up their mind what they are, they go out and spend thousands of dollars on operation to adjust their body to fit their thinking. If it's just your thinking, why did you bother with your body? I mean, think about that. That doesn't work, does it? It's obviously not just your thinking. Okay? There's obviously more to it. So, here's the reality. The truth and the reality is simply believing something does not make it reality. It really doesn't. If it did, there'd really be, in that particular case, there certainly would be no reason to change the physical reality into the fantasy that's in your head, the idol that's in your head. But instead of doing that, we should embrace the wonderful thing that God created us to be. And that's where the blessings are. But we have to think beyond our flesh. We have to think in spiritual things, not just the physical things. Okay? Can't just think in a physical realm, in the lust of the flesh. We got to start thinking in spiritually. Paul goes on here in Colossians 3:2. He says, be mindful of things above, not on things of the earth. There's a thought. Put that one in your head. For you died, and your life has been hidden with Messiah in God. So when we die to the flesh, Paul talks about that a lot, about I die daily, I die to my flesh, I have to defeat it every day. Granted, everybody has fleshly, hormone, sugar-driven, TV-driven thoughts, okay? And the question is, did you take them captive? And part of taking it captive is, my thoughts are not running me. My flesh is not running me. This is not about me. The blessings are in Him. Where am I going to walk? We have to make up our mind. Therefore, put to death in your members, which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desires, and covetousness, which are idolatry. Think about that. If I come up here and start talking about idols today, You don't think I'm going to talk about fornication? You don't think I'm going to talk uncleanliness and passions and evil desires and covetousness? We just don't think about that. You know why? Because the enemy's subtle. He's got us looking at statues and stones and Buddhas and men on crosses, thinking that's the idols. How much trouble does that really get you in? Remember, the enemy's subtle, more subtle than anything ever. No, what gets you in trouble is the things you don't see. Granted, those things are physically, biblically wrong, and they do open the door for the enemy to operate. So we don't want to deal with that, obviously. But usually the spiritual part is even more powerful. And in this case, we see that. We were just talking about, the struggle with couples, and in marriages. It's not that somebody brought a statue, brought a Buddha home. They brought this junk home. This junk right here is what destroys marriages. Okay? Now, by the way, you might look around and find some kind of statue in your house that's connected to that thought. That's another thing that we have to do, is pay attention to that. There's a connection. Okay, so you got that there's mental, spiritual idolatry. We're going to move on. This book, this portion of Deuteronomy has a phenomenal amount of instructions and commands. So we're going to move to another subject that comes after this. It has to do with one altar. And we think about it, when God introduces one altar, here it is, 12:5, it says, "You shall seek the place which Yahweh your Elohim shall choose out of all your tribes to put His name there, even His dwelling place. You shall seek that, and there you shall come. And there you shall bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your heave offerings of your hand, your vows, your freewill offerings, and the firstborn of your herds and of your flocks." One place. See, up until this time, the idea was wherever people were, they would worship their God. They would have an altar. Even in Abraham's time, we see that. And so here, as Israel, once Israel forms as a nation, as a people, He's like, there's a place. There is one place on this planet. It's going to be inside of the property of one of your tribes, namely Judah. Okay, it's going to be inside of Judah and Benjamin. It's going to be Jerusalem, and that's going to be the one. So this is the introduction. This is totally foreign to the culture. One altar. What do you mean one altar? Well, there's one God. There's going to be one altar. There's going to be one place. There's one set of rules. There's one set of commands. All that's foreign to them. So here it is. This is the idea of that. And so he tells us there, in this portion, it starts talking about tithes. It goes right into that. It says in 12:6, it says, "There you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithes. And there you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall rejoice in all that He's put all that you put your hand to, you and your households, in which Yahweh your Elohim has blessed you." So I put there that this is the second tithe. See that? This is the second tithe. There are actually 3 tithes, and there are really many more types of giving than that, and you see some of them even listed here, but there are actually 3 tithes, and this is the portion that talks about them, so we're going to talk about them. Of course, our first reaction is, oh my goodness, there's 3 tithes, I'm struggling to pay the 1 tithe. I don't have enough to pay all 3. The problem is not that we don't have enough to pay all 3. The reality is we don't have anything. It's a thinking problem. Psalms 50 says, "For the beasts of the forest are mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills." So we got to get over our Western thinking. In our mind, in our world, we think everything belongs to us. But in Scripture, we see no. It's some farmers going like, "Hey, these are my cows." Like, really? It's my grass and it's my hill. What are you going to do with your cows? And by the way, you're mine too. And the land you're standing on, the planet. You know what? The planet you're standing on, I built it. What did you make? Where were you? You go to Job. I'm like, where were you when I stretched out the heaven? It's like, who are you, oh man? So, what else? I know all the birds of the hills and all that. Not just their mind. I know them. You know the birds? Do you know their name? Do you know that bird's name? No, not what he's called. Do you know his? He has a name. I know him. You don't know him. Okay? He's mine. By the way, your cow that you numbered 13, he's got a name too. And it's not 13. I call him 13. That's what his name tag said when he was little. She was little. I know all the birds of the hills and all that moves in the field. It's mine. If I was hungry, I would tell you, for the world is mine and the fullness of it. Everything that it's full of. Everything in the world, Yahweh says, it's mine. What are you worried about taking some of my stuff and putting it where I'm asking you to put it? That's all a tithe is, right? Taking some of his stuff and putting it where he asks you to put it. When he asks you to put it there. Okay? So, it kind of changes the order of it when we start looking like that. But, he's not trying to use that against us. He's trying to use that for us, because if we will step in his order, he says it's going to be a blessing. Right? And he is for us, not against us. In fact, it says, if he is for us, who can be against us? So he's already for us. The question is just, are we going to be in order with that? Or are we going to be operating against him? Okay? Three tithes. The first one, ma'asar, is the word tithe in English, or the English word is based on the meaning of tenth. It's Old English means tenth. Ma'asar in Hebrew. And it's simply, I think everybody knows what that is, but I'll go over it. The first tithe is the one everybody recognizes. It's the tithe on your increase. That's what the verse says. You start out with this much, and now you have this much. That's an increase. Okay, however much it increased, that's your increase. That's what you tithe on. But here's where it gets interesting. Leviticus, when we go to the Torah, every tithe of the land, whether it's the seed of the land or the fruit of the trees, is Yahweh's. It is holy. Do you ever think of it? Do you ever realize that the tithe, we know he owns it anyway. Even he's talking about the firstborn of the animals, they're mine. Okay? They're holy. So really it's our chance, it's our opportunity to participate in something that's holy. In this particular case, it's used to support the ministry and the priesthood. Okay? It was used in the first century in Yeshua's day to support the temple and the synagogue. Okay? Priests and the Levites. Okay, so that's the first tithe. I think everybody knows what that one is. You shall tithe, at 14:22 of Deuteronomy says, you shall tithe all the increase of your seed that the fields brings forth year by year. So if you planted 100 pounds of seed and you got 1,000 pounds back, it's easy math. You tithe on 900 pounds, right? Okay, so because you already had the seed and you're going to save it. By the way, it wasn't GMO back then. They actually saved the seed from the field, okay, because seed was the fruit with the seed its seed is in itself. So, okay? See, weird stuff. Now, you plant something. You ever tried planting one of these great big tomatoes? Oh, I'm going to grow some more of them. Plant the seeds and you get like something goofy. You get little cherry tomatoes. Like, how is that even possible? See, its seed is not in itself. There's the problem. Okay? Okay. 3 tithes. The second tithe, let's talk about that one. Deuteronomy 12:6. And it's talking about to the feast, you shall, to the feast, and in Jerusalem specifically, because they were commanded to go to Jerusalem to the feast, right? 3 times a year, we're going to see that. So there to Jerusalem, to the feast, you to bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, and your tithes. Now notice there's more than tithes here. And your heave offerings of your hand, and your vows, and your freewill offerings, and the firstborn of your herd. How many is that? 7. That's the completeness of Yahweh's offerings. So there's really 7 categories here that he talks about. And there you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall rejoice. Okay, so it's a holy thing we're getting to participate in, and it's a rejoicing because we're there at the feast, which, is feasting. And all that you've put your hand to, and all that your house in which Yahweh your Elohim has blessed you. Okay? So, what about eating there? Well, part of that is specifically for that. And that's actually part of this tithe. We're going to look at it. So, first of all, The second tithe is not part of the first tithe. Okay? It comes out after first tithe. It doesn't come from the first tithe. It's based on blessings. It is not based on income and increase. That's the first tithe. This is based on blessings. Remember? That's basically what it's saying. Here it says it's where Yahweh has blessed you. So it's based on your blessings. The eating part, it actually says in another place that if it's too far away, if it's unreasonable, like if you're in the northern Galilee and you're going all the way to Jerusalem and you got to haul all this food, it says you can sell it and you can take the money and you can go there, and then when you're there you can buy what you need. And that's closer to the way we do it. We like the Feast of Tabernacles. Why? We've hauled a lot of food from here. I mean, thousands of pounds in the past. We have shifted that because we're not doing that this year, praise Yah. It's being hauled there for us. And basically, that's exactly what we're doing. They have our menu, and they're going to prepare our menu for us, just like last year. It's like, we like your menu, and we're going to do it. Okay? And it's going to arrive there in semis, not my poor little overloaded trailers, like it usually does. So, but that's basically what we do. We sell our increase of whatever it is, and we go there with the money and we buy what we need. So we pay for the food. That makes sense. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before Yahweh your Elohim at the place he will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay? We call that Passover typically. But it's actually Feast of Unleavened Bread is the correct name. At the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot, also known as Pentecost. And at the Feast of Tabernacles. And they shall not appear before Yahweh empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able according to the blessing. So again, this is based on blessing. This is not based on income. This is not based on increase. This is based on blessing. So every man shall give as he is able according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim that he has given you. Okay? So if we show up with nothing, what are we saying? You didn't give me anything. That's probably not true. He gives everybody something, So it's probably not a... You have to think about that one. And you just have to be honest with him because he knows. And so, what it's talking about here, that he's like, yeah, but it says all the males show up. Okay, so the males are responsible to carry this out. Sometimes the women would stay at home and take care of the animals in order for them to go and participate in this, in order for them to take their blessings and share it with the priesthood and with the family and with the people there. So it's really the men's. This is about order, okay? This is not the order. I'm not talking about the order. This is actually about order. This is about structure, order, biblical order, okay? And the covering that men are spiritually responsible for their family. If something's going wrong, who's God going to talk to? Who's God going to hold responsible? Let's put it like that. It's not talk to the hand, it's I'm talk to the man, okay? Okay? You go like that and it's, no, I'm talking to the man. It says in my word that you're responsible for this. Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you going to the feast? Are you doing that? Okay. So in Yeshua's day, there was actually where you come up on Temple Mount, there was some big boxes or jars sometime. Josephus talks about that there's big clay pots there. And they were actually labeled as to what they were for. If you were doing a sacrifice, very often you didn't bring the sacrifice. You brought the money for the sacrifice because you knew how much it was. And they would buy however many sacrifices of doves or whatever it was, and they would sacrifice them, and you would sit there and you would just be praying when they did that, and you say, you know what, that one's for me. You didn't actually have to do it physically. When it got so many people by the first century, they had adjusted it that way. Originally, you would bring it in your hand when it was a tabernacle, but as it increased to people, it got more difficult. So this is where Yeshua would sit there. This is a typical place. There was a colonnade there. It's covered, it's shaded around the southern end of the Temple Mount, where you would come up on the Temple Mount. And there were mikvahs there, mikvahot, or baptismals, a bunch of them. The debate as to how many. But he would sit there, and the other rabbis would sit there and teach their disciples. And that's actually where he was sitting when he taught the story of the widow's mite. We know that because that's the only place he could have been watching. And obviously was sitting there with the disciples teaching, and that was a common thing. And it says that, that she cast in her 2 mites and that was all she had. We're going to talk about that in a second. The third tithe, this is the third tithe. At the end of every 3 years, everything's in this Torah portion. At the end of every 3 years, you shall bring the tithe of your increase in the same year and store it within your gates. The Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance, and the foreigner living among you, the fatherless and the widow who within your gates, shall come and be able to eat and be satisfied, that Yahweh your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. So again, this is based on blessing. This doesn't come from anything else. So the third tithe is an additional tithe, entirely separate from the first tithe. The first tithe supports ministry, remember. The second tithe enables us to attend the feast. Okay? It's paid yearly. People, by the way, there's some people in the congregation we have that pay it along and along and along and along. And that's an awesome way to do it, because you don't have I need new tires. Let me use this money. And then it's feast time. You go, I don't have enough money. I have to say, Rodney, you're awesome at that. You he gets it paid up front all the time. It's like no matter what else is going on, you get that done. And then when it comes feast time, boom, it's done, right? You're not struggling at the last minute. Unless you mess up right at the last minute, right? But no. And there's several other people too that do that. So that's what that one's for. It's to prepare to set it aside so you know that when time for the feast is, you've got that taken care of. This it is paid yearly. I mentioned that. The third tithe this one's unique. It's not paid yearly. It's paid on a 3-year cycle. Okay. And so the question is, and I get asked this question a lot, so when I start doing this, I'm going to start setting this aside, and who's it for? Well, really, it's for the poor, okay? It has 2 purposes. One, originally it was completely for the poor, but also it's not just that they can eat, it's so that they can attend the feast. And so that's the most critical way that it's used today. Let's look at a couple of verses here. Deuteronomy 15 says, "For the poor will never cease out of the land. Therefore I command you, you shall surely open your hand to your brother, your needy, your poor in your land." Okay, these are specific commands. Who he's talking about and where they are. Right? If your brother, because we back up, who's my brother? It's talking about as my physical brother. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you, then in the 7th year, now right after that, it's saying you let him go free in the 7th year. That's the year of release, right? So it's telling you here that in the physical, your brother is somebody who is a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, or an Israelite. Okay? In other words, somebody who's in the congregation, somebody who's in the community, somebody who's in the walk with you, okay? That's people that actually want to go. It's also the people we're responsible for, right? And so the reality is the poor part of this today is mostly taken care of through our welfare system, which is funded by our taxes, okay? So pretty much everybody, if you pay taxes, you support this system whether you choose to or not. It was based on, God's word originally. Our laws were originally, they've gotten really perverted and twisted, but originally, over the Supreme Court in Washington, there's actually a copy of the 10 Commandments. I'm surprised they haven't ripped the front of the building off, it's the crazy stuff. But it's there. And so really that part is taken care of just in general. That's taken care of. But we still have things where somebody locally has something happen, gets hurt, can't work for a couple of weeks, the workman's comp doesn't kick in for 2 weeks and all that. So you can get in trouble in a couple of weeks, where you just need a little help. This would go for helping for that. Okay? So we have, but like I say, the real major use is to allow people to go to the feast. This is one that's actually brought to the feast typically, okay? One of the ones that you bring. And if you do that, we request that you write on it third tithes so we know what it is, and we put it specifically to that purpose to help people come. That there's several people we help, elderly and widows and orphans, to come that don't have enough to make it. They help, but they don't have quite enough to make it. And we have to do that because if you think about our cost, for example, just using us for an example, our congregation, our costs are fixed. In other words, it's not that we own the land there. Our fixed costs, and even the food prices are fixed. So all that's actually fixed by the camp, especially as of this year. Galatians 6:16 says, "For in Messiah Yeshua, those who walk according to this law, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God." Look very closely at what that's saying. Paul totally understands who Israel is. So it's saying those that are in Messiah Yeshua, who walk according to, and it had talked about the peace and mercy and the power and presence of Yeshua. So if we're in Messiah, this is always the same idea of going back to, if you're in Messiah, you're Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. He's saying here that if you're in Messiah and walking according to the instruction, a lot of people are in Messiah but not walking according to the instruction. Okay? So I'm not saying they're not saved, but are they Israel? Probably not. It wouldn't be considered biblical Israel. Biblical Israel is the obedient of God. So you can be saved and still not be obedient. You can be saved and be in all kind of curses because you're walking contrary to the blessings. But Paul's saying here, if you're walking according to the law, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God. And I looked up this in a bunch of translations, and just to make sure that that's what he was saying. That is what he's saying. Okay? So then, one of the things that people do with this is the answer to a question I asked earlier. It's like people ask me, how do I know when should I do it on my birthday? Should I do it on the year I was born? People have tried all that. I think it's kind of cool to use your walk when you became an Israelite, when you accepted the instructions of God and decided to walk in blessings instead of curses. Let that be the beginning of your 3-year cycle. Okay? That makes sense? So you save up for 3 years, and then you give that, and you have something that's more significant. It really doesn't have to be much. You save it over 3 years, and it adds up. And then we have people giving every single year, so it doesn't all come in one time and not another time. It's like, oh, we didn't get anything this year to help people. We got some this year, everything this year. Does that make sense? It all makes sense. Yahweh's teaching His order works. Now, this is talking specifically about the feast that's coming up. It says on the 15th day of the 7th biblical month. I added that so we know what it's talking about, not on your calendar. They're like, we're in the 8th month. No, the 7th biblical month, it's still coming. When you have gathered the fruit in the land, you shall keep the feast to Yahweh 7 days. You shall take on the first day fruit of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, the boughs of thick trees, and the willows of the brook. And you shall go moping. No, you shall rejoice. Okay? Hallelujah. We take those things and wave them before praise Yahweh. We made it. It's a feast. It's powerful. Okay? So are we getting ready for tabernacles? Because that's what this is talking about. Amen. All right. So we're getting ready for tabernacles. So this is one of those, what they call pilgrim feasts. This is one of the major ones, the major one, that we go to. Okay? And we keep that. At the end of every 7 years, you shall make a release. And this is the manner of the release. Okay? This is the release, the 7-year cycle of releasing things. Okay? Jubilee year, the Yovel. And this is the manner of release. Everyone who has a loan to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor and his brother, because the release has been proclaimed for Yahweh. So notice this isn't for your neighbor or your brother. It's for Yahweh. It's been proclaimed. So this is on, there's a bunch of stuff in this portion. This is still part of this Torah portion. there's an instruction here in this that Israelites on both sides have struggled with. But Yeshua came along, Messiah, he answered this question. And what do you think their question is? How do I know who this guy is? How do I know who this guy is? Because we see in Scripture it's not so much physical necessarily, so how do I know who it is? Yeshua answered this very question in Luke chapter 10, verse 29. It says there's a certain lawyer, they've had this conversation, and this lawyer had asked him, that sounded good, and they were talking about the brother. Lawyer there actually doesn't mean like he's an attorney at law. It means he's an expert in the Torah. He's a Torah teacher, a Torah expert. Okay? So, probably a Pharisees. They were the experts. And you go, Pharisee. Notice what he told the Pharisees before we beat them up. He never said, you Pharisees, you have no idea what you're talking about. He said, you're hypocrites. Problem is, you do know what you're talking about. He never called Sadducees a hypocrite. They didn't know what they were doing. It was the Pharisees that knew the Torah. They were the Torah experts. You can believe this guy is a Pharisee. Okay? Paul was one. Paul, in fact, he didn't say I was a Pharisee, by the way. He says I am a Pharisee. This is years after Yeshua's death. Okay? So this expert in the Torah stands up and he says, there's the question. There's the burning question. Who is my neighbor? Okay? So the Torah expert knows the letter of the law, okay? But he's still struggling with who is my neighbor. Yeshua in 10:30 through 35 tells him the parable of the Good Samaritan. I won't go through the whole thing. You know the story. The guy gets beaten up. A priest comes, walks by him, walks around him. A Levite comes and walks around him. It's sort of funny. It's like he walks on the other side of the road. He's talking about the road he's describing is about that wide. It goes along the edge of the mountain. So like going around him was like that. It's like, it was almost like a joke. It was like an inside joke for anybody who knew what he was talking about. And so he tells this whole story, and then this Samaritan who the people, especially the Pharisees of his day, you know, they're half-breeds, they shouldn't be here, they're disgusting, let's just get rid of, I mean, they're, you know, worshiping the wrong place, they don't know anything, oh my goodness, they're like that church down the street, for goodness sake, you know. That's the way they're doing. And so this guy comes along, and what does he do? He bandages up the guy, puts him on his horse, spends money, does everything that any, you know, good believer should do. And Yeshua asks this Torah expert, which one was the neighbor, or which one was the brother to the one who fell among the robbers? I note it's interesting to me that he couldn't even bring himself to say this, the Samaritan. He's the one that showed him mercy. I mean, because seriously, there's like a clash, and Yeshua's got this guy on the spot. It's like the guy. And what does Yeshua say? You go and do likewise. That had to bite. If you know the culture and the way a Pharisee would have thought of a Samaritan, that had to bite. And he's looking at this guy, it's like, this guy doesn't know anything. They're going on the wrong day of the week. They're going to the wrong place. They don't keep the feast. No, you go do that. See, he knows the letter of the law. And the priest, legally the priest and the Levite actually did not have to help the man because they would have become unclean and been unable to serve in the temple. And so, according to Torah, it actually was okay for the priests that walked by and went on the other side of the road. That was okay. It was okay for the Levite. They could show in the Torah where, hey, I can't touch a man that's bloody and dying. I'll be unclean and I can't serve. So they had a legal excuse. Okay? But this lawyer knew that the spirit of the law is mercy. And that trumps the letter of the law every time. God's grace and His mercy trumps the letter of the law every time. So we can have the letter of the law right with all our boundaries and, creating our borders and boundaries, just like these priests had. I can't do that. The Torah says I'll be unclean, and I can't do that. But we can be totally wrong in our spiritual walk, which should look like Yeshua. Would he have walked by the man? No. When he's seen lepers who were unclean, we've seen all these people, he goes up and he puts his hands on them. He has mercy on them. Have mercy on me, son of David. And he turns out of the way and he has mercy on them. That's the difference between the letter and the spirit. And so we have the answer to that question, who is my brother, right here. It's the one that showed mercy. It's not legal boundaries. And then the master says, not only to him, but to us, because it's recorded in his word, you go and do likewise. That's who a true Israelite neighbor is. That's who it is. You want to know who your brother is? You want to know who your neighbor is? That's who it is. Okay? It goes on, and this is another one that's like a real struggle with translation. Like, what is he saying here? It's pondered. It says, you may exact it, talking about, he says, so if you've loaned money to your neighbor, your brother, in the year of release, in the 7th year, the year of Yovel, the year of Jubilee, whatever he still owes you, it's like, don't worry about it. Let him go. And everything. That you got somebody that sold themselves to you, and that was very common. You get so poor and whatever, there was no social system. So sold themselves to you, it's like, hey, you're free to go. But if it's a foreigner, and that word is the same word as Gentile, a foreigner, Gentile, pagan, don't think of yourselves as Gentiles. You're not Gentiles if you're in Messiah Yeshua. You're Abraham's seed. I mean, that's got to get knocked in your heads because for so many years somebody told you were somebody else. But if it's a foreigner, you can say, no, you got to pay me. Okay, you got to pay me what you owe me. You got to pay me your interest. But your hand shall release whatever is yours with your brother. Now that we know who a brother is and who our neighbor is. Okay. Only that there shall be no one in need among you, for Yahweh will greatly bless you in the land. Now, I'm going to just stop right there for a second because we just read, it's like the poor will always be among you, right? This is not a statement. This is a command. It's an emphatic command in Hebrew. And what God is saying is that this portion, this whole section is about walking in blessings and not curses, right? All right, so he said, you can take it from a foreigner, but release what is your brother's. Only there shall be no poor among you. Okay? Like, well, they are. Well, there's not supposed to be. If there's poor among you, you're not walking in the blessing. You're walking in curses. There should be no poor among you. That's the command. That's the instruction. But because we don't walk in the blessing, he had to give us instructions. Okay? The poor should be all other than Israelites. Okay? Those outside of that. So there's not supposed to be. Let's see what's next. It says Yahweh will greatly bless you in the land only if. Ruh-roh. There's that big little word. Only if. And this is how it started out. He said, pay attention to what I'm saying. I'm putting before you blessings and curses. So Yahweh will greatly bless you, not just a little bit, greatly bless you in the land if you carefully listen to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim and take heed and do all his commandments which I am commanding you today. Bunch of stuff right there. For example, wait a minute, the voice of Yahweh today? Who is the voice of Yahweh today? Who is the voice of Yahweh? Yeshua. He's called the Word of God. Okay? So the voice of Yahweh, we have to listen to him. That's what he's saying. Tell us how to do it. Carefully listen. Guess what that word is in Hebrew? It's better than that. It's Shema, Shema. It's Shema, Shema. Yeah. Like listen, listen. I know you listen like listen, Shema, but I want you to Shema, Shema. To the voice of Yahweh. And take heed to do all his commandments. It's only if, and that's why There are people in need. There's not supposed to be anybody in need, only if you Shema Shema to the voice of Yahweh to do. And that's the whole thing with Shema, is you hear and do. Okay? So that's really what makes it work. Hebrews 13:1 says, "Let brotherly love continue. Do not be forgetful of hospitality, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it." And I think there's no doubt that the writer of Hebrews had this verse in mind. In Genesis 18, it says, and Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood before him, you should say. And there's all kind of translations. I look it all up, and then I just put something on there. 3 men stood before him in his presence, actually is what it means. And when he saw them, obviously not beside him, because now he's going to run and meet them. If they're beside him, that doesn't work really. See ya! They're before him is what the word means in Hebrew. And he ran. He didn't just like, yo, what's up, yo? Yo. No, he runs and meets them, right? He's like, and he ran and meet them. You know, he ran out of his tent door, runs and bows before him. My goodness, you know. And he said, "My lords," this is used in the English way. It's like, if I've found favor in your sight, don't pass me by, you know. Don't leave. Let me get a little water, I pray. Again, Old English. You seen that? How are you doing? Pray. You know, you ever seen that in the old movies? They used to talk like that. So I pray you listen to him is what it's really saying. It says, let me get a little water be brought to you to wash your feet. Here, rest under the tree. I'll bring you by just a little morsel of bread, you know, a little something, comfort your heart, no big deal. And after that, you can keep going. This is probably why you even stopped. I mean, it's a blessing you're here, you know. That's why you're even here. I said, okay, go ahead and do that. And really, the people wonder, does Abraham know who this is? God doesn't realize that this is him in the flesh until after verse 15, when Sarah and he and Abraham start talking, and Sarah says, I didn't laugh. And he said, yeah, you did laugh. And he wasn't standing there. It's like, uh-oh, this guy knows something. Yes, you did laugh. Yeah. So this hospitality, I mean, his entire culture here, Abraham's culture, is like this. It's a very generous culture. And it's that culture, that understanding. This wasn't unusual for Abraham. This is the way Abraham operates. Okay? This is who he is. It's that culture that Yahweh chose to build Israel on. It's that culture, that man that he called out. Okay? And he crossed over, became a Hebrew, and ultimately has these grandchildren that produce the 12 tribes of Israel. And Messiah. And so when it gets to Messiah, Paul says, if you're in Messiah, you're a child of this guy. So how should we act? Like somebody else? No. We're supposed to act like our father Abraham, that we're grafted into through Messiah Yeshua. So that grace, that hospitality is what we're supposed to do, right? So how do we do when we compare ourselves to Abraham, our father? You know, remember the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Who is it that's my brother? The one who showed mercy. Where did he get that idea? It's based on Abraham. The Samaritans were descendants of Abraham too. They understood that. The difference was religion had got away, had got in the way. Okay? They had essentially become the Torah terrorists of their day. Okay? But it hadn't happened in the Samaritan culture. They're right up the road away. They're not that far away. 25 miles, 50, 40 miles maybe. Right up the road. Okay? And so they still understood that they were descendants of Abraham and they ought to act like it. Deuteronomy 15:7, it says, if there is among you a poor man of one of your brothers inside of your gates in your land, okay, it's real clear who that's talking about. It's not I'm sorry, this is just what it's talking about. So this is people that you have some kind of relationship with it, physically, if not other than that. This is one of your brothers in your gates, talking about in your town, in your land, which Yahweh gives you. You shall not harden your heart or shut your hand from your poor brother. Okay? Open your hand wide to him. You lend him that he needs. Lend him what he lacks. Okay? So it's hospitality and grace. See, boundaries, I talk about boundaries a lot, especially when it comes to spiritual warfare. But sometimes the enemy will cause us to go overboard. He takes every good thing, I'll say this over and over and over until we get it. We're going to get it. He'll take a good thing and turn it to extreme until it becomes a bad thing. He will take the good parts of your personality and take it to extreme, the thing that makes you strong, and take it to extreme until it works against you. That's what he does, because he can't create. So what can he do? He just works with what you got. He works with what we give him. So boundaries are an awesome thing. We need them. Boundaries, borders, covering. I talk about that all the time. We got to have that. But if we put up too many boundaries, we start blocking out the brothers. Okay, we start blocking out the people, the very people we're supposed to be helping. Boundaries are created to keep the enemy out, not the friends out. Okay, now we want to create boundaries that are so powerful we keep everybody out. Okay, that doesn't work. It obviously doesn't work. And we can support it with the Torah. I mean, the Pharisees, the priests and the Levites certainly did. Like, I'd love to help you, man. I'm sorry. You know what it says. I'll quote you a couple of verses here, and then I'm going to keep going. Can't be unclean. That's what the word says. Sorry, dude. Okay? Is that the way God wants us to be? No. He says, you go and do like the Samaritan did. Show him hospitality. The poor shall never cease out of your land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand to your brother, your poor and your needy in your land. You shall surely give to him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give to him. Because for this thing, Yahweh your Elohim shall bless you in your work. Don't worry about it. He's got this. He's working through you. When you bless them, he's going to bless you. Okay? So he's going to bless you. What does it say? Shall bless you in all your works that you put your hand to. Now this doesn't mean you can, seriously, this is just Torah. You can't sit at home and give away everything and think the mailman's going to come and start bringing checks. That's not what he said. I'm going to bless you in what you do, what you put your hand to. Okay? So, I don't know, if you're not being blessed in what we're putting our hands to, that's an area we should look at, for example, because there's always corollaries there. So maybe we're not being generous in some kind of way, or maybe it's out of balance in some kind. That's what the enemy does. He just wants us to get out of balance. Because we're like an old tire. If we get really out of balance and it's not working so good, right? What else? You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Yahweh redeemed you. Okay? We have to remember that we were, Egypt is a picture of the world. We have to remember in our day, they're remembering, it was bad. We were in a pagan nation with pagan lands, and the people didn't care about us. They hated us, and we were, so up in that culture. They were so up in that culture that when they came out, what did they do? At Mount Sinai, they built a golden calf. That's a god from Egypt. Okay, that's one of the Egyptian gods. I almost said his name, but I'm not going to. Let me just go without saying any pagan names today. That's Torah too. So, but everybody here was in the world in that spiritual Egypt, in a pagan land. We were in slavery to sin, right? Okay, so he brought us out of that. We were a slave in the land of Egypt, and we were redeemed by what? The same thing the Israelites were when they brought out, by the blood of the Lamb. Okay? Hallelujah. Okay? In Matthew 19, Yeshua's having a conversation. It says, the young man said to him, I've kept all the commandments. He says, I kept them. I've kept all the commandments from my youth. What else do I lack? Yeshua said, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give it to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven. And then come and follow me. Okay? So, he challenges our thinking. He challenges our Western thought. He challenges where we are today. To be like the Samaritan. To be the person actually that Torah commands us to be as a brother. Keep in mind that there's bottomless pits out there. I mean, we can go to just a couple of buildings downtown somewhere and we can find a room full of people that will break us from now on. That's not who he's talking about. He might talk about that somewhere else, but he's not talking about that then. He talks about your brother, your family, okay, your neighbor. That's who he's talking about. And the idea is to help them, to encourage them, to put them back on their feet, okay? And so this guy's very rich, and he says, sell what you have. You want to be perfect? You lack one thing, and you will have treasure in heaven. And he's already promised to bless us if we do that, right? So what are we fearing? What are we fearing? I think we can trust him. Y'all think we can trust him? Amen. Amen. So that is the end of the portion for today. There was a lot of stuff there. There's even some more details in there. But it was interesting that theme of blessing starts in the beginning and it flows all the way to the end. If we will walk according to what he has planned, we will be blessed. And so I always challenge people. I challenge myself. It's like if there's an area I'm not blessed in, I need to look really close at what I'm doing in that area. And it might not be this. It could easily be something else. But look closely in that area. And the idolatry is an interesting one, that we become like the things we worship. Do we worship our work? Do we worship money? Do we worship, our flesh? We worship the lust. I mean, think of the things people have turned into idols. And the dangerous ones are not wood and stone. The dangerous ones are the ones you can't see. Okay? So there's a lot of stuff there to ponder. There's a lot of opportunities there to walk in blessings and avoid curses. There's a lot of things there for us to behold. Amen? Amen. Father, we thank you for this portion today. We thank you that you have set before us all these blessings and curses and challenged our minds to just stop and ponder it, discern it, think about it, challenge it, grasp it, enjoy it, behold it. Thank you, Father, for your instructions in life and your instructions in blessings. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Amen.